So today we are talking about basically like setting your business up for the next level before you're there. I think this is a really important and interesting conversation because I think that the typical way we do this is like wait until we're there to set our business up for that, and that doesn't always work super well. So we want to talk about that. We are giving away Megan's hiring template, which is phenomenal, by the way. Some of my clients have used that and had a lot of success. Some of my clients have also hired Megan to hire for them, and she has done a stellar job. They are so great. So if you need hiring help, especially after this conversation, hiring template is what we're giving away. If you do not win it, still highly recommend getting it because Megan is fantastic at it. So that is where we're at today. Everyone is saying yes. Alessia was exhausted. Michelle is saying it is such a Monday. So good. Mm-hmm. It is not just us. It's this freaking Monday. Patty loves your brain. Jordan's good way. Good. Perfect. I love her brain too. Okay. So first things first, I think that one thing I really wanted to share about too, and I think Megan has been so good at this, and we'll talk about this in many levels, but I think you're very good, Megan, at thinking about things before we need them. And so that's kind of what I want this conversation to be about today. So making processes before you need the process, hiring team before you absolutely need them, like really thinking kind of like futuristically and strategically in your business and thinking ahead of the game. I think that so many people make processes and systems an afterthought. And I will say for some of my clients that has worked, like they've really grown super fast. And then we kind of go in and build the system behind it. But I don't think most people want to grow that way because it's a lot messier and more intense than most people think. Do you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's one of those things where like, then you're almost in problem solving mode constantly. Like you're always fixing things. And I think that like, for me, that's not, I like to solve a problem, but like, I like to kind of proactively solve problems and kind of like set myself up to be in a situation where like the problem solving is like, feels simpler to me versus being in like, there are fires everywhere. We have to kind of set up all these systems to fix all of these like issues that are going on. Right.
Yes. 100%. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, what is okay and works versus what is kind of like ideal, right? Is it okay to like build the plane while you're flying it? Yes, absolutely. And sometimes that's what has to happen and that's what it is. And that's okay. Is it better to have the plane already built? Ideally, yes. And so that's kind of what this conversation is about. So something that I think we've talked about on here a lot that really applies to this is Megan's rule of if something has more than 2 steps, it needs a process. And so this is one of the ways to get prepared before you need it, is to start writing out and actually making processes for all the things you're doing, because at some point you're going to want to hand that off to someone else. And if you haven't already created a process around that, it is going to be infinitely harder to delegate and hand that off. So I'll let you talk about that rule a little bit, Megan. I'm sure some of our peeps have heard you say it before, but I think it's a very important reminder. And we can talk about how to use it with growing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's one of those things where I think when we think about like systems and processes and like SOPs and stuff like that, we tend to think of like really big processes too. And I just don't think of it that way. I think of like anything that has more than 2 steps has a process, even if it's like the process is step 1, like if it is just 2 steps, step 1, do this, step 2, do that. But like, I think that the more that you can really think about things in the different steps and start to outline those things, even if you're still the only one doing everything, down the line, that's just number one, it does make it easier for you in the short term because you are streamlining what happens. So for example, with like onboarding a client or something like that, even if you're the one still doing everything, it's like, okay, step 1, I have the discovery call and then I send them the contract and then I have an invoice and yada, yada. And so it's like, even if you're doing all those steps, it just creates a little bit more of a consistent experience on the client end. It also makes sure that you're not like forgetting something or, doing something like not remembering, like, oh, did I do that thing for them or whatever. But then it also makes it so that when you are ready to pass that off, whether it's the whole process or just one step of it, it makes it so that that's so much easier to delegate down the line, because you've kind of started to like organize that and outline that in a more step-by-step way.
Yes. I even remember the exact thing that you're saying is like, I used to onboard all of our clients because obviously like we don't onboard a ton of clients at once, and it was one-on-one and whatever. And then when I had to hand that process off to you, it was helpful because I did already have that written out how I did it. Like, obviously it wasn't like as well as you probably have it now and stuff, but I had a very clear checklist already of like, these are the things I do for every new client. And I would use a checklist for every client. And so I remember there was a time where it was just like, I can't do this anymore. This is a lot. And it was the most simple thing to hand off because it was done. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to even write it out. I don't even think we had a call about it. I think it was just literally like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think then it was like the passing off process became more about like, hey, let me ask a couple clarifying questions, like this or this, or like, what's your preference on this or something, or like, hey, like, what do you normally do for an onboarding gift or something like that, versus it being something like really just trying to figure it all out at the same time and kind of trying to create the process while you're delegating.
Yes.
It's easier to kind of have the process first, at least like a rough, outline, like a checklist, essentially. That's all we're talking about, really. It's like writing out a checklist and then starting to pass that off.
I laughed because Jess said, build the plane while you're flying is the alternate name of my business. That was incredibly clever and funny, and really gave me a chuckle. I love you. Michelle said that she used to do like large student events, and they always planned for like all the contingencies so they could like be available to troubleshoot. Totally, exactly that. And she said she has a lot of processes but only half are documented. Yeah, so like that could just be the work to do, right? Because it's kind of like, again, it's like building it. And I think like some of the things too with this are mindset. It's like building it, assuming you're going to delegate, building it, assuming your business is going to grow. Like, I really think some of this is a mindset thing too, because it's just like, I think it's too easy almost to kind of be like, I'll get to that later. It's almost like you're being assumptive of like not being in growth mode, right?
I also think it's like when you don't prioritize that, I think it can be really easy to start falling into like, well, I'm the only one that can do this because I'm the only one who knows how. I'm the only one who knows what the process is and stuff. And so when everything lives in your brain, that it kind of just like your brain starts to almost like instill that even deeper, that you're the only one that can because you're the only one that knows it. But once you start to kind of get that out and be like, no, brain, this is possible to delegate some or all of this process, then that's what can really help you kind of separate that a little bit more.
That's so true. I love that. Michelle said this can be my team goal, focus on documenting undocumented processes. Look at me, time lapse together. Look at you. Yeah. So last week we did our business vision board, and
right.
everyone needed a team goal. So this is the perfect one. And I think what's nice about it, Michelle, what you're saying here too, is like, even before you have a team, it can make you have team goals. And that's what's really helpful. Do you know what I mean? I think that sometimes when we're at that starting stage, it feels like, oh, that's forever away, or that's not even a thing yet, or whatever, instead of being like, oh no, like that's coming. And so I'm getting prepared in this way. And I think that is so, so useful.
I know we're going to talk about this a lot more like later on this live, but I feel like that's also one of those things where like, if you start to plan ahead, you can kind of chip away at some of those things too, where like Michelle can just like be like, cool, I'm going to set aside like 30 minutes or an hour a week maximum to starting to, systematize these different processes and write them out and all of that, versus it being a situation where like all of a sudden you're so full and so busy that you need to hire and delegate. And now all of a sudden, all your energy is needing to not only just keep up with your normal work, but then also create systems and delegate and all of that. And all of a sudden you're basically doing like 2 jobs at the same time, which can just feel so overwhelming in so many ways. So
Amen.
Yeah.
So overwhelming. I have so much more to say on that. Hi, Leah. She said, love y'all's dynamic. I've learned so much about delegating from you too. We love you. Jordan said, getting so much better at thinking about when I have more team, we'll do X. Yes, exactly, Jordan. That like, even that is the goal, right? Is to just be in that thought process. Michelle said, totally to the, you can do this before having a team. Doing this is what literally let me hand off my social media when I went on mat leave. Bingo. Exactly.
Yes.
So it's like, instead of having like Megan said, 2 full-time jobs prepping for mat leave, basically, like you were able to do that simply. Jess said, such a good idea when you're running a program or offer for the first time too, to take time to document what you're doing. Yes. Megan is a very big stickler about that. Like, everything, like the first time that happens, we try to write it out and document it as much as possible, because ideally you're never doing things once in your business, which is a whole other conversation. But even still, like I know some business owners who have like launched like 7 times and still don't have a launch sequence or plan or whatever. And it's like, you're just reinventing the wheel every time. You're leaving so much money on the table in terms of what you could get out of the launch, but you're also spending a lot of money in terms of like reinventing that every single time. Like, that gets very expensive very quickly.
100%. And I think that, like, you know, just in terms of the time, like, I think that that's just such a, like, there's so much time that goes into creating stuff. And so sure, like when you launch something or create something for the first time, you'll probably, like, it might take a little bit longer, 1, because it's the first time, but then 2, if you do take the time to create processes, but then that's what makes it that much faster once you start to repeat it. And the more that you repeat that, the more you're just refining it versus, like you said, reinventing the wheel like over and over.
Yes. Processes equals refinement is basically what you're saying. Like, you can't refine something if you don't have a process for it. Even like, Michelle, I'm like looking at your comment, but even client onboarding, like, you can't get better and better and refine that process unless you actually know what that process is. And so it's just like such a simple, small thing, but it's like, I feel like some of the best like things we've done in the business have come from the fact that we had a process that we were able to make better. Right. But because we had that foundation, it was easy to be like, well, this part doesn't work and this part doesn't work. Like, where can we make that better or make that fit together? And that's, I think, where most of our best things have come from. Do you agree with that?
Well, and even just like, you know, I'm just thinking about literally and stuff like that. And even like, we just are launching the Little Ones mini series. First episode dropped today, and the rest of the week they're coming out.
Look at Megan being the best
COO
ever, making a plug for literally.
But like, this is also the second mini series that we've done, and we had done one actually back in, like, I want to say we did Do the Work in like 2019 or something like that.
2020.
And so, I mean, it's been over 2 years, right? And so, but because I had known when we were doing Do the Work miniseries that this is probably not the only miniseries we're ever going to do. I'm going to create a process and at least start writing down the steps that need to happen, right? And like the things, okay, we need to get the guests and set up interviews and yada, yada, and like all of the things. So then when we did this mini series, even though it's 2 years later and my brain is clearly not remembering all of the steps that I did 2 years ago, it was actually really streamlined where we could just go through that same checklist. So I think it's just one of those things. It's like, you know, it's just such a good reminder to be like, even if you don't necessarily see, oh, I'm not going to use this like all of the time, even so, write it out, because you also don't always necessarily know when you're going to find that relevant and useful information, right?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you guys are excited. Jordan said, so good. I need all these tips as I'm planning to quickly grow my team. So exciting, Jordan. Hopefully this helps. Leah just says, hi. Yeah, it's 2 years since Do the Work. Freaking crazy. But I will say, doing the mini series this time was, I would say, exponentially easier, at least for me. I don't know how it felt for you. You tell me.
I mean, same. Yeah.
But like, was exponentially easier because we had that. So I felt so much more at ease. Like I remember when we did do the work, I was like, oh, that actually was a decent amount of work. And so this time I was kind of like iffy on if I was going to do it. And then I decided like, yeah, I really do want to do it anyway. And then it ended up feeling like almost no work. So, yeah, it really just is that difference, I think, sometimes between like, are you again building it every time, or are you like, it's already built, just get in and fly the plane, you know?
Yeah.
So this also, I think, lends itself to the conversation of when to hire, because that's something we really wanted to talk about. I I have a mixed story with this, but I would say I did a great job of hiring before I absolutely needed to hire. That's something I'm like really proud of at A Lit Up Life, is I could see where it was going, and like we were getting clients, and I could see like, oh, I'm going to need that, so I'm not going to wait. So that worked out really well. I did not make the best hires initially, many times over. So, you know, mixed bag. You should get Megan's hiring template so you don't do that. But I really do think that I did an excellent job in terms of making sure that we got help before I absolutely needed it. And I am so grateful to myself for that, because I think it would have been so much harder to grow this business initially as quickly as I did had I not. Even though it wasn't great help, it was literally still help, right? Like it makes such a difference.
100%. And I think that it's one of those things where like, you know, sometimes you do hire people that aren't necessarily the right fit. And so imagine how much more stressful and more overwhelming that would have been if you had waited until you absolutely needed that help.
Oh my God, so
right.
true.
And then it's like, there's just so much more pressure around that of like, and just, you know, so many things. So I think it's like, you know, hiring a little bit earlier and kind of planning ahead for that also gives you so much more space around, okay, cool. I have the time to make sure I'm finding the right person and finding the right fit. I'm making sure that I'm having the space to really like train them and, you know, help with like just kind of the initial onboarding process and stuff like that. And also if it doesn't work out, I still have the spaciousness around being able to find somebody else without it feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't let this person go because like things are going to fall apart, or, you know, whatever else can happen. Right.
No, you're so right. Because like you may not hire the right person the first time. And so if you're waiting until you're drowning, then you're trapped. Like, right? You're either doing it all yourself, or you just have the wrong person continuing to make mistakes and you can't let them go. Such a mess.
Right.
Leah said, LOL, same. Biggest mistake, assuming someone is the right fit because they've worked for others, you know, without considering it how they're right fit for you. So true, Leah. That's something I did as well. So I totally agree with that. I think it's so easy to be like, oh, great, you did such and such in someone else's business. Cool. Like you must be great. And it's like, that's like actually a really bad determiner. Oh, that's so cool. Alessia found me through the Do the Work series. So cool.
Oh, fun.
So yeah, I think hire before you're ready is a thing that I think is such an important piece of advice that I don't think it's given as advice very often in our industry, because I feel like there's such a pressure on like coaching, hire support and coaching, that it's almost like all energy and money is like getting directed at that. And nobody's just like, hire a VA before you need one. Like, but I really think hire a VA before you need one kind of is like the best advice. And really any team member, like, to this day, like I will have conversations with my clients that are much further along than like first team member. And it's like, okay, if we know that's coming, let's hire them now and have a runway. Instead of like, so let's say we knew we needed someone in January. I would be like, let's hire them now because we need them in January. We don't need them now. So perfect. This is the time, right?
100%. Yeah.
I also think it's a way, and Megan, you can speak to this a little bit, but I think it's like one of the ways in which it's hard to be a really good leader when you really need someone. And so sometimes you could even hire the right fit and you literally don't have time to be a great leader to them or be great at onboarding. So sometimes it's not even that you've hired the wrong person. Sometimes it's just that you fundamentally waited too long, that now it's a fucking mess, and like not even the perfect person can make that different, you know? Do you agree with that?
Totally. I think that that's something too, where like, I mean, think about it. Like even just like the energy in that is really difficult on both parties, like you as the business owner and also the team member, because you're kind of entering into a relationship where like just the circumstances are really stressful and like high pressure and like potentially really overwhelming on both ends. And so when you're entering into a relationship and those are the circumstances, you're kind of almost setting yourself up to fail. And so like you might luck out and like it could totally work out fine. But also I feel like, you might want to ask yourself, like, is that the way that I want to start out a relationship with a VA or OBM or whoever you're hiring that I'm hoping will be in my business long term? So I really want to kind of give ourselves a bit more of a runway. So like, I think about launching a lot too, because like, I know a lot of people will kind of, I think that it's more common now to be talking about like giving yourself a runway of like prepping a launch before you launch and stuff like that. And I think about it the same way with team. And a lot of people too will kind of think about, I need to hire someone to help me with the launch. But you don't want to wait until right before your launch to hire them, right? And a lot of like launch strategists and ads managers and like people like that often will be like, no, sorry. Like if you wanted to hire me for this launch, you needed to hire me 6 months ago or, whatever. So I think
at minimum 3 months.
Exactly. Yeah.
At minimum. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of the point here, is that like a lot of times, so like, let's play this out. Say you're like about to launch and you're like, oh, I should do ads and I should get a VA to help me, or I should get a strategist or a launch strategist, whatever. Okay, great. Then they're all like, hey, we can't. So your launch doesn't go as well as you want to. And then you feel like you can't afford to pay for them for the next one because this one wasn't successful and blah, blah, blah. And it like gets you so up in your head, versus like, if you can take some of these actions earlier, it's sort of amazing how much better things can play out. And so, I feel like we're kind of constantly on here making the case for planning ahead, but this is pretty much just that too. Like, I think it makes so much more sense to, I mean, we don't even think about things logically sometimes, right? But if you think about it, it makes so much more sense to pay for 2 additional upfront months of a VA to then have someone that is operating really well and really efficiently than to have to like onboard someone, have it be a disaster, fire them, rehire. Like,
totally.
Financially, it does not make sense. So it's like sometimes we just have to stop and think about the like practicalities of that.
And I think too, it's one of those things where like, I think often we can get in our heads around like, oh my gosh, if I hire someone, I have to have like almost like I need to be able to pass them X, Y, and Z things, or like need to give them X, Y, and Z before like I'm ready to hire. And I think what I have always found to be true, and I'm curious if you feel this way too, but like I always like have more than what I necessarily think. Like almost like once you start to work with someone, you're kind of you kind of like your brain shifts into a mode of like, oh, what else can I like pass to them? And you're just starting to see more opportunities and more areas where you can get their support. And so I think it's one of those things where you can start small and just continue to grow, but also I just think that actually being in the process with someone of starting to work with a team and starting to delegate, it does become a little bit of like a snowball effect where like you just start to see more and more and more opportunities for delegation.
100%. I totally agree with that. Actually, I was talking to one of my clients about this recently because she was saying to me, like, I feel like you're already so good at delegating. Did anything change when you got back from maternity leave? Did you delegate more? And I was like, I actually did. But if you would have asked me before I went on maternity leave, if I had delegated everything I could have, I would have said yes. Like I didn't realize it until like the opportunity was there to be like, hey, what else, can I give? What else? So it's totally true what you're saying. Like, I think that there's always more to look at there. But Jordan brings up a good point, which I think is worth talking about. She said, I'm such a financial person, so it majorly messes me up when I see a profit margin dip without results.
Mm.
And I think that what has always helped me in my business is remembering that the action I take now, the results are probably at least 3 to 6 months away. I think whenever we're trying to do dollar for dollar, like in terms of like investment results in our business, we're shooting ourselves in the foot because it almost never plays out like that. And then what happens is that we don't make that connection. So like, for example, let's say you hire a team member now, and then 4 months from now, you really start to see the result. It's almost like we forget that probably got started 4 months ago. And we're like, oh, what's happening now? And it's like, well, that was probably the result of something that happened back here. So what's that? So I'm always trying to do that in my business. Like, if I'm getting a result I really like right now, I try to dial it back a few months and be like, what happened then that led to this? So I think that can be really helpful, because the truth is, and I tell all my clients this, like, pretty much anytime you're hiring, you're always going to see a dip in profit margin before it goes back up. Like, obviously there's some cases where that's not going to happen, but I would say most cases, that's exactly how it's going to happen. Don't you agree?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think like it makes sense too, because like it's kind of the same with like a marketing strategy or something. Like, you're not going to start posting on Instagram and then like tomorrow you're full of clients. Like, things take time to play out, and you do have to kind of build, like, again, it's kind of like building the runway. So like, you're going to see results after that kind of gets, like, you get into a rhythm of that, right?
Yeah. And that's why this idea of like build the team and the processes before you're ready is so important, because you're potentially 3 to 6 months out from seeing the results of them. So if you wait until then, you're just continuing to extend your timeline. Yeah. Jordan says, I know for my clients, but now for me. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's always easier to know for our clients. But I think that's kind of the point of this conversation, is like, you want to be like, where do I want to be 6 months from now? And am I starting to build the processes and team for that? Right. Versus like getting there and then being like, well, we have no processes or team now. And now I have to take 6 months to clean all that up. Which, trust me, I've been there in clients' businesses where they had like really fast growth and it was awesome. But then we have to like almost plateau for a little bit while we go in and put in all the things behind that to make it so it's even possible to scale past that. And so it's basically like, you're going to extend your timeline one way or the other. It makes so much more sense to do it on the front end and to have that feel well oiled than to do it later, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe I even said that wrong. Like, technically, what I meant to say is not extend your timeline. What I meant to say is you're going to use that time either way. So for it to be on the front end versus extending it on the back end is the thing, right? So whatever stage you're at, like, that's what I would try to think about, is like, where do you want to be 6 months from now? And can your business even handle that right now? Like, such an important question. I was literally just talking to one of my clients about this morning. She was telling me like some goal that she had that's like, you know, maybe like probably like a 4-month goal. And I was like, well, like, you don't even have the processor infrastructure in place to do that yet. So we have to do that like now if you want to see that 4 months from now. And she kind of had a light bulb moment of like, oh, duh. Yeah, that makes sense. But it's like, sometimes it's like we see it as like, oh, it's 4 months from now, but it's like, it's 4 months that you want to be seeing that come to fruition. Yeah.
Totally. Well, and I think it's like, it's one of those things where I think it's easier sometimes when it's something big, like a launch or like like something that's like a bigger thing. And I think that what I found to be true is that it doesn't matter like if it's a big launch or a big program or like a new podcast or whatever, like even just kind of like normal levels of growth and scaling in your business, like even if it's like the same thing, but just like more like, okay, I have 3 clients now and I want to be at 10 clients in 4 months. Like, what do you need? Even if it's not like a big program or new thing that you're doing, it's the same story. You still need the same to be asking yourself the same questions and kind of thinking about both the systems and processes, as well as the team support that kind of will support you in getting there.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, what you often like in both examples that you're using, what you really need is more time. Like if you're going from 3 clients to 10 clients, what you need is to figure out how you're buying back your time, right?
Right.
So it's like, can you do everything you're doing and serve 10 clients? If the answer is no, then you have some stuff to think about, right?
Right.
And so that's why, again, it's like the now of that action is so important, because if not, what happens? You overwork, you get burnt out, and you tell yourself the story that you can't handle 10 clients. I've had so many clients that have come to me with a story of some version of that. I can't handle X, right? And like all that really happened is they couldn't handle it because they didn't delegate soon enough or early enough. And then they created this whole story of like, their business can't handle that. And it's like, well, your business absolutely can handle it.
Yeah.
It's just, you didn't do anything to plan for that. Right.
Right. Right. And I think it's one of those things too, where it's like, maybe the business couldn't handle it within those specific circumstances.
Yes.
But once you start to improve the infrastructure, then of course, like you're basically adding on to the building, right? Like you're adding on like a spare bedroom and then a bathroom, whatever. And of course, like it can handle it, as long as you're really just laying the foundations for that, right?
Yep, 100%. So build the processes before you're ready, hire the team before you're ready. And, this is such a mindset, but also practical thing is like, do it with where you want to be, not where you're at. Like, I think that that's, I mean, it's the cheesiest thing in the world, right? But it's like, that's kind of the foundation for all business growth is like, are you operating from where you are, or are you operating from where you want to be? And I'm not saying like, oh, you want to eventually have like a multi-million-dollar business, so go hire 15 team members. But I am saying like, there is a big difference then kind of just like plodding along at like, oh, I guess I'm just going to keep doing it like this for a really long time, or being like, in 4 months, I want 10 clients. What does it look like for me to get completely set up for that? Because energetically, it's so easy to push stuff away when you don't think, like if you have 7 clients and you're maxed out and you're like, why am I not getting more clients? Well, probably because you're working your ass off for 7 and there's actually no energetic space for that.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you feel like you see that with clients, Megan? Like when you kind of first start, or I mean, I know it's been a while since you started with somebody, but it's almost like they're saying they want more growth, but you can see how it's like totally getting blocked because there's no space for it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting too, because sometimes like I almost feel like the bad guy in some ways, because I'm kind of like, that's a great idea, but here's what that, like, here are all the things that we need to do in order to make that happen.
This sounds like our Black Friday conversation. Yes.
Yeah. That's a good example. Like, sure, but also like, here's kind of what goes into that, and here's what that means and stuff like that. And so sometimes I've gotten good at identifying when clients are kind of doing those things too. And so I can kind of like say it very, very quickly. But I think that it's just a really common thing where like, I think everybody kind of does it, where it's just, they're not quite, like their brain is not quite on board yet with what needs to happen in order to get to where they want to be. Right. And I think sometimes like we can almost like convince ourselves that it's like, oh, it's something that I'm doing like in my marketing, or I need to like update my copy or like something like that. And sometimes those things do need to happen, but sometimes it's just the infrastructure and like kind of the energy around, like, do you have the things in place to be able to support that,
Totally agree. Hey, Katie. Oh, hey, both Katies. Katie Armstrong and Katie Cohen. Hi, guys. So yeah, I was teasing Megan because we basically had this conversation about, I had like this idea for something. Sorry, spoiler alert is we're not doing anything for Black Friday, just FYI. But I had this idea for something kind of crazy. You guys know me. I love to like try something different and do something crazy. And Megan was like, cool. So here's everything that's going to take. And I immediately messaged her back and was like, fuck Black Friday. We're not doing any of that shit. But like, what's true about that is that if we wanted to, we could, because this conversation happened end of September or something like that. So we would have had 2 months, but like, that's a great example of the stuff you have to start putting processes in place for if you want to. I ultimately decided I didn't want to do that, but like, this is a great thing. If you're thinking that you want to like make whatever huge sales on Black Friday, good, you should have started planning for that like maybe 30 days ago. Don't freak out if you haven't. I'm not saying like all is lost. You still have plenty of time, but like, it's just really seeing things like that of like, I need to be thinking far enough ahead to be able to set up what I need to get there. Or to be able to decide not to. Like, again, this year I've decided like not to do Black Friday for the exact reason of like, I could see what it would have looked like in the lead up to that. And I didn't want to do it.
And I think that that's a really good, like, to me, I think like that's a really good thing that team can help you with, not necessarily like making those decisions, but like, I have like just reminders to myself that just like recur every year at the end of September. Check in with all clients on Black Friday stuff, or like check in with all clients and like and team around like holiday time off and stuff like that. And so like I've kind of, you know, now I kind of had trained myself to do it, but like I even just have reminders that pop up, you know, to tell me like, hey, think about this thing that's like coming up in a couple of months and start planning for that now. And so I think that that's something that you can absolutely like have your team, like a VA can do that, of like having like, hey, I'm not making the decision. I'm not like coming to you with like the whole strategy and like, you know, what we're going to do or anything, but they can at least kind of prompt you and like kind of set up those like questions for you to be like, hey, just a quick nudge that like, you know, this is something that we should start thinking about and talking through, you know?
Yeah. Or like at the very least, if you don't have one, that's even planning for the business you want to a certain extent, is like, okay, like let me go set all these things in my calendar for a year because I'm planning to like be in business for the next year. I need to know all these things. Like, I think it's like, you know, how seriously are you kind of taking it? And are you like willing to be like, cool, I already want to think about Black Friday of next year in August or what, I'm just making that up. But like, right, like go put that in your calendar, go really start owning that. I think that again, it's like, you don't want to be at Black Friday being like, oh, bummer, I know I could be crushing it right now. And I didn't like hire the VA in time, or I didn't like set up a process in time or whatever. And I know that like the kind of sexy, cool thing in our industry right now is to like do everything inspired and on the fly as fast as possible. And like, right on, if that feels good for you. For me, that's a no. Like, I like to do things from inspiration for sure, but like, one, I have like clients to take care of that I want to serve really well. I don't want to be like running around like a crazy person because I had some idea in the shower. Two, I have a team that I also don't want to feel like they're running around like crazy people. And three, I have a baby. Like that life ain't the life for me, right? Like, so if it is for you, disregard everything I'm saying. If you're seeing other people do that and you're like, wait, that seems like a lot, same. Like, there is a way to do that that doesn't feel completely fucking overwhelming. And it's plan ahead. It's think about what you'll need before you need it. It's operate with your goals in mind. It's not, I need to make an extra $3,000 this month. So like, what can I sell? Like, that does not need to be the way you operate.
And I think one thing about like planning, I'm sure that we've talked about this quite a lot in past live streams, but I think one of the things that about planning that people don't really think about is like, when you plan ahead, when you have the systems and processes, when you have team to support you, that actually is what ends up clearing up space and time and energy for the more of like easy implementation of inspired ideas and easy implementation of like, oh, I'm just gonna hop on this like live stream because I want like blah, blah, blah. Like it just creates more opportunity for those types of things. And then it feels very, like, it just feels simpler to do those things rather than like everything feeling chaotic and last minute.
It's like the mini series you mentioned earlier. That was like an inspired idea, right? But like, because
Mhm.
we already had processes documented and something in place, it was much easier to execute on that
Right.
inspired idea. It wasn't like chaos. It wasn't like whatever.
Mhm.
And I never have that urgency of like, and it has to be up by next week or any of that. Right. So I think that those are important things. And like, if you're thinking ahead, you don't have the urgency of it has to be up by next week because you've literally planned for it.
Right.
And like, I'm not a big fan of like have a year-long plan and follow it like so rigidly to a T no matter what. But even if you end up deviating from that plan, but that plan helped you put processes in place, helped
Mhm.
you get systems set up, helped you figure out where you might need to hire, right? It served its purpose. That was kind of the whole thing. It doesn't matter if you actually launch on October 22nd or whatever.
Right.
It's like, did that plan guide you to operating from the place you want to be in your business? Great. That was the point. So I think like using a plan loosely like that is really important too. And like Megan said, it's not never don't come from inspiration. You can change the plan anytime you want, but it's going to be infinitely easier to change the plan when you have like the team and structures and processes set up to do that.
Mhm.
Teams should not be your afterthought, like is something that I kind of want
Mhm.
to like end with. I think that it's so ironic to me in our industry how it feels like, I don't know, like if you see this too, Megan, but it almost feels like all the strategy and all the things are like so important. And then team is almost like this afterthought kind of thing that you hire after, all of that comes to fruition. And I just think it is so harmful to some entrepreneurs because it feels so overwhelming and so chaotic. And I think they dip out before they really should because one, they've overspent on all those things. So it
Mhm.
feels scary to hire a team. And two, it feels like I cannot possibly manage all this. And it's like, because you don't have teams. So anyway, like
Mhm.
if there's one point here, it's hire a team early before you need them and make that just as much of a priority as your coaching, your programs, whatever, because those can only take you so far if you don't have someone there to help you implement. I can say that from the coach perspective.
Yeah.
I can only do so much for my clients if they don't have any ability to get some of it executed, right?
Mhm. And I think again, like just thinking about, most people don't just like naturally know like how to hire, like what to look for, or how to choose like who's a good fit for me and stuff like that. And like that's actually a lot of what I go through or like talk about in my hiring template because it's like yes, some of it is stuff that like is individual to each person, but also like you can go through a specific process and kind of like let it take time rather than feeling like I'm just hiring the first person that was recommended to me and like regardless of whether or not they're a good fit for my business and what I need, and like when you can actually like take the time to really identify what's important to you, identify what you need, identify like the values that you're looking for, all of those things, and then approach the hiring process from that place, that's when you're going to just have a lot more success versus like hiring out of desperation and just like the first person who pops up kind of thing.
So agree. Jess says I need to find the happy medium between year-long planning and not doing it in a way that's not just a bunch of procrastinating and imagining. Maybe Megan and I can save that and do that on November or December's live. We can talk
Mhm.
about like how we do the balance of like actually having it be useful versus like, because I totally get what you're saying too. Like, I think there's a way to be like, I'm planning and get like all the markers and the fancy planner and the
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like such a juicy kind of thing that then actually you're like, wait, I just wasted like 3 days of my time. Like what
Right, right.
actually? So anyway, I like that one. Let me make a copy of this and I will write it down.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, good. Sold. If you guys have any other things you want Megan and I to do, tell us. We are very happy to. Um, okay, so remember if you commented today, you're entered to win the hiring template. Megan, maybe you could drop the link for it in case
Yeah.
anyone else wants it, but start planning early, start hiring early. Think about what you start like it's October, y'all. Start thinking about what you want coming up and knowing like, do you have the structure in your business to get there because it is going to take time. And if you know you want something to happen in January, now is the time to start thinking about it because we're 3 months out, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
fucking 3 months out. That's mind blowing, right?
Yeah.
So good. All right. We love you guys. Thank you for being here as always and interacting with us. And of course, thank you to Megan because
Oh,
Megan just is the best and just comes and does these to serve you guys. She really has
love it.
no skin in this game, but we are so
Right.
grateful to her for coming and I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Bye guys.